I got fired by my new Clueless boss on his first day, but he had no idea what trouble was coming. It all started on a crisp Monday morning, the kind where the air feels charged with possibilities and new beginnings. I had been working at Crestwood Marketing for nearly 8 years, steadily climbing the ranks from junior copywriter to senior content strategist. The company had become my second home, its halls filled with familiar faces and shared memories. Our team was tight-knit, functioning like a well-oiled machine where everyone knew their role and played it with precision. The previous Friday had been business as usual, brainstorming sessions in the conference room, laughter-filled coffee breaks, and the comforting rhythm of deadlines met and projects completed. We were preparing for a major product launch that would determine the company's position in the market for years to come. As the lead strategist, I had spent months developing comprehensive marketing plans, analyzing consumer behavior patterns, and crafting innovative campaign strategies that promised to revolutionize our approach. Little did we know that our world was about to be turned upside down. Over the weekend, rumors had swirled about changes in upper management, but no one paid them much attention. Corporate restructuring was common enough in our industry that we'd all become accustomed to the occasional shake-up. Plus, our department had consistently exceeded expectations, making us feel relatively secure in our positions. The thought of anything disrupting our established order seemed preposterous. When I arrived at the office that fateful Monday, everything appeared normal. The receptionist greeted me with her usual cheerful smile, and my colleagues exchanged morning pleasantries as they settled into their workstations. It wasn't until 9:30 a.m., when an unexpected announcement interrupted our regular staff meeting, that the first tremors of change began to ripple through our department. A new regional manager had been appointed, and he was starting immediately. No transition period, no introduction, just a sudden appearance that would alter everything we thought we knew about our professional lives. The moment he walked into the conference room, it was clear that this wasn't going to be a typical management change. His name was Richard Thompson, a man in his early 40s with an expensive suit that somehow managed to look both perfectly tailored and slightly ill-fitting at the same time. His handshake was firm to the point of being uncomfortable, and his eyes darted around the room with an intensity that felt more aggressive than confident. As he introduced himself, his words came out in rapid-fire succession, each sentence punctuated by dramatic pauses that seemed designed more for effect than emphasis. Richard's opening speech was a masterclass in corporate doublespeak. He spoke of streamlining operations and maximizing synergies, but his delivery lacked any genuine understanding of what these terms actually meant in our context. When someone asked about his background, he vaguely mentioned extensive experience in various industries, without providing any concrete details. His responses to specific questions about our ongoing projects were even more concerning. He nodded enthusiastically, while clearly misunderstanding fundamental aspects of our marketing strategies. What struck me most was how he carried himself. Every movement seemed calculated, from the way he adjusted his tie every few minutes to how he leaned forward aggressively during discussions. His attempts at casual conversation felt forced, peppered with outdated business jargon and awkward attempts at humor that fell flat. When presented with our detailed quarterly reports, he skimmed through them with visible impatience, occasionally making comments that revealed a startling lack of comprehension about digital marketing trends and consumer behavior patterns. The disconnect between his authoritative demeanor and actual knowledge became painfully apparent during a discussion about our upcoming campaign. When our analytics team presented data showing a clear shift in target audience preferences, Richard dismissed their findings with a wave of his hand, insisting that gut feeling was just as valuable as data-driven insights. His suggestion to revert to traditional advertising methods, despite overwhelming evidence supporting digital channels, left the entire team exchanging worried glances. Perhaps most telling was his interaction with our longtime project manager, Sarah. When she tried to explain the intricacies of our current workflow system, he cut her off mid-sentence, claiming that too many cooks spoil the broth, and that decisions should be made by people who really know what they're doing. The irony was almost too much to bear. Here was a man who couldn't differentiate between SEO optimization and SEM strategies, yet he spoke as if he held all the answers. As the meeting progressed, Richard's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He would suddenly interrupt ongoing discussions to ask basic questions about terminology everyone in the room understood, then counter any explanations with his own convoluted theories. His attempts to assert authority often resulted in him contradicting statements he'd made just minutes earlier, creating a chaotic atmosphere where no one was quite sure which direction we were supposed to follow. By the end of the hour-long meeting, the tension in the room was palpable. Our usually vibrant team sat in stunned silence, watching as Richard concluded with a declaration that he would be shaking things up to bring our department into the 21st century. The irony of this statement, coming from someone who had just demonstrated a complete lack of understanding about modern marketing practices, wasn't lost on anyone. As he dismissed us with a curt nod, I couldn't help but notice how several team members lingered behind, whispering urgently among themselves, their faces reflecting the same mix of disbelief and concern that I felt growing in my chest. The true extent of Richard's managerial incompetence became glaringly apparent during our afternoon strategy session. As we gathered in the main conference room, ready to present our carefully crafted campaign plans, he launched into what could only be described as a verbal assault on everything we had built over the past months. His criticisms were not constructive. They were sweeping generalizations based on superficial observations and misguided assumptions. When our design team showcased the new branding elements, he dismissed them as too colorful, without offering any alternative suggestions or understanding the psychological impact of our chosen color palette. What happened next still makes my blood boil when I think about it. In the middle of Jessica's presentation, our brilliant data analyst who had spent weeks compiling crucial market research, Richard abruptly stood up, interrupting her flow. "This is all very nice," he declared, gesturing dismissively at her meticulously prepared slides, "but I don't need all these numbers and charts. What I need is action." Without waiting for a response, he proceeded to announce that he was dissolving our current teams and reassigning everyone to new projects based on criteria that remained frustratingly vague. The chaos that followed was unprecedented. Team members scrambled to understand their new roles, while Richard barked orders that contradicted each other. When our social media manager pointed out that his proposed posting schedule violated platform algorithms, he accused her of being resistant to change. Our content calendar, once a masterpiece of strategic timing and audience engagement, was torn apart and replaced with what could only be described as random guesswork. But the worst was yet to come. As the day drew to a close, Richard called me into his office. The room smelled of fresh paint and desperation, a fitting backdrop for what transpired next. Without preamble, he informed me that my position was being eliminated effective immediately. His reasoning? Something about needing fresh perspectives and not seeing enough leadership potential. The irony was staggering, being fired for lack of leadership by someone who couldn't tell the difference between a KPI and a CPC. Standing there, listening to his rehearsed justification, I realized something far more concerning than my sudden unemployment. This wasn't just about me losing my job. It was about the future of everything we had worked so hard to build. The campaigns we had painstakingly developed, the client relationships we had nurtured, the innovative approaches we had pioneered, all of it was now in the hands of someone who viewed marketing as little more than a series of buzzwords and gut feelings. As I packed my belongings under Richard's watchful eye, I couldn't help but notice the nervous glances from my former colleagues. They understood, perhaps better than I did at that moment, that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. Walking out of Crestwood Marketing for what I thought might be the last time, I felt a curious mix of emotions swirling within me. The initial shock of being fired had given way to something more complex, a burning determination fueled by indignation and a deep-seated knowledge that Richard's actions would have far-reaching consequences. As I stepped into the elevator, my phone buzzed incessantly with messages from concerned colleagues. Each text painted a clearer picture of the chaos unfolding upstairs. Panicked clients calling about vanished campaign materials, confused team members trying to make sense of contradictory instructions, and mounting anxiety about upcoming deadlines that were rapidly approaching. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on my shoulders as I read through the messages. These weren't just professional concerns. These were people I had worked alongside for years, individuals whose careers and livelihoods were now hanging in the balance. The injustice of it all crystallized in my mind. Richard's reckless decisions weren't just affecting abstract business metrics, they were impacting real lives, including those of families who depended on steady incomes and career growth. The thought of leaving them to navigate this disaster alone felt fundamentally wrong. My resolve hardened as I remembered the countless hours we had invested in building Crestwood's reputation. We had transformed the company from a struggling local agency into a respected player in the national marketing scene. Our innovative campaigns had earned industry awards and set new standards for creative excellence. To see all that progress threatened by someone's ego-driven mismanagement was unbearable. More than that, I knew exactly what Richard didn't: the intricate web of relationships, processes, and strategies that kept our operations running smoothly. As I reached the lobby, a plan began forming in my mind. I couldn't simply walk away and let Richard's ignorance destroy everything we had built. Instead, I would leverage my network, my knowledge, and my experience to fight back. The industry connections I had cultivated over the years suddenly took on new significance. Former clients who had benefited from our successful campaigns could vouch for our expertise. Colleagues scattered across different agencies might provide crucial support or even opportunities for collaboration. Even competitors, who respected our professionalism, could potentially become allies in exposing Richard's incompetence. Most importantly, I realized that my departure put me in a unique position. Free from the constraints of corporate hierarchy, I could operate with unprecedented flexibility. While Richard dismantled our carefully constructed systems, I could gather evidence of his mismanagement, document the fallout, and prepare to expose the truth. The challenge ahead was daunting, but the stakes were too high to back down. Every email notification, every concerned call from a former colleague, reinforced my conviction that this wasn't just about revenge or personal vindication, it was about protecting the integrity of our work and the futures of those who had trusted us. Standing on the sidewalk outside the office building, I made a silent promise to myself and to my former team. Richard might have thought he was eliminating a threat by firing me, but in reality, he had unleashed a force he couldn't possibly comprehend. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready to fight, not just for my own redemption, but for the survival of everything we had worked so hard to achieve. The following days unfolded like scenes from a corporate thriller, each moment revealing new layers of Richard's disastrous management style. Within 48 hours of my departure, the first major crisis erupted when our largest client, Technova Solutions, received a completely botched marketing proposal. Under Richard's direction, the team had somehow managed to submit materials that not only failed to meet the agreed-upon specifications, but also contained significant factual errors about Technova's products. The client's furious email landed in everyone's inbox simultaneously, CCing the entire executive board and demanding immediate explanations. Meanwhile, chaos reigned supreme in the office. Projects that had been meticulously planned for months were suddenly reassigned to inexperienced team members who found themselves overwhelmed by responsibilities they weren't prepared for. Deadlines were missed, communication channels broke down, and the carefully calibrated workflow system we had developed crumbled under Richard's insistence on intuitive decision-making. The situation worsened when he decided to implement a new project management software overnight, without proper training or transition period, causing widespread confusion and data loss. From my position on the outside, I watched as my former colleagues navigated this perfect storm of managerial incompetence. Through discreet check-ins and carefully maintained contacts, I learned about the daily struggles they faced. Morning meetings had devolved into shouting matches, with Richard dismissing legitimate concerns as negative energy, while simultaneously blaming others for problems he had created. The talented graphic designer who had won multiple awards for her work was reduced to tears after Richard publicly criticized her designs as too artistic for commercial purposes, despite client feedback praising their effectiveness. What struck me most was how quickly morale deteriorated. Team members who had previously thrived on collaboration and innovation now operated in silos, afraid to share ideas that might be shot down or misinterpreted. The lunchroom conversations that once buzzed with creative brainstorming had turned into whispered exchanges about job security and escape plans. Several key personnel had already begun circulating their resumes, and the turnover rate was climbing at an alarming pace. Even our usually unflappable IT department was showing signs of strain, as they struggled to clean up the mess left by Richard's ill-conceived technological overhauls. The financial implications were becoming impossible to ignore. Major clients were threatening to pull their accounts, citing inconsistent service and poor communication. Several smaller projects had been delayed to such an extent that penalty clauses were being triggered in contracts. The marketing budget, once managed with surgical precision, was hemorrhaging funds due to duplicated efforts and wasted resources. Yet when confronted with these issues, Richard responded with increasing aggression, accusing the remaining staff of sabotage and demanding loyalty pledges that felt more cult-like than corporate. Through it all, I maintained careful documentation of everything. Every complaint from former colleagues, every client escalation, every operational breakdown was recorded and cross-referenced. My network of contacts within the industry proved invaluable, providing insights into how other companies were reacting to Crestwood's sudden decline in performance. Former clients expressed their disappointment and concern, some even reaching out directly to offer support or advice on how to handle the situation. The pattern emerging from these interactions was clear. Richard's reign of terror was not just affecting internal operations, it was damaging the company's reputation and market position in ways that might prove irreversible. Perhaps most telling was the behavior of our longest-standing partners and collaborators. Agencies that had previously competed with us for business were now openly questioning Crestwood's stability. Freelancers who had worked with us for years were hesitant to take on new projects, citing concerns about payment delays and scope creep under the new management. Even our most loyal vendors were becoming cautious, requiring upfront payments for services that had previously been billed monthly. The ecosystem we had so carefully cultivated was unraveling before our eyes, and Richard remained blissfully unaware of the magnitude of the destruction he was causing. As I observed the unfolding disaster, I couldn't help but notice how Richard's actions were creating a perfect storm of opportunity. His systematic dismantling of Crestwood's infrastructure had inadvertently opened doors that had previously been firmly closed. Former clients, frustrated by the company's declining service quality, began approaching me directly, seeking guidance on how to salvage their marketing initiatives. Industry peers, aware of my expertise and the circumstances surrounding my departure, started recommending me for consulting projects and speaking engagements. The power dynamics shifted in unexpected ways. Colleagues who had once reported to me now found themselves in positions to influence significant decisions. Several senior team members, disillusioned by Richard's leadership, quietly formed a coalition to document every misstep and misguided decision. They began feeding me information through secure channels, creating a comprehensive record of Richard's incompetence. This insider intelligence proved invaluable as I started positioning myself as a consultant specializing in crisis management and organizational recovery. My professional network expanded exponentially as word spread about Crestwood's troubles. Competitors who had previously viewed me as a formidable adversary now saw me as a potential ally or asset. Recruitment firms bombarded me with offers to join other agencies, each one eager to benefit from my extensive experience and insider knowledge. Even venture capitalists and angel investors started reaching out, interested in discussing potential startup opportunities in the marketing sector. The very chaos Richard had unleashed was creating a fertile ground for new ventures and strategic partnerships. The media landscape presented another unexpected avenue. Industry publications, always hungry for insider stories about corporate meltdowns, began expressing interest in my perspective. While I maintained professional discretion, carefully avoiding any direct criticism of Richard or Crestwood, my insights into best practices and crisis prevention became highly sought-after content. Webinars and panel discussions offered platforms to showcase my expertise, further solidifying my reputation as a thought leader in the field. Most significantly, Richard's incompetence was creating a vacuum in the market. Clients who had relied on Crestwood services were now looking for alternatives, and other agencies were positioning themselves to fill that gap. My deep understanding of these client needs, combined with my extensive network of professional contacts, placed me in a unique position to facilitate these transitions. The very disruption Richard had caused was generating opportunities for innovation and reinvention that might otherwise have taken years to emerge. As the weeks passed, I found myself at the center of a growing movement. Former colleagues, industry contacts, and concerned professionals began reaching out regularly, sharing stories of Richard's latest blunders and seeking advice on how to protect their interests. What started as individual expressions of frustration evolved into something more organized, a network of informed insiders determined to expose the truth about Crestwood's management crisis. Through encrypted messaging apps and private online forums, we created safe spaces for sharing information and coordinating our response. The data collection process became increasingly sophisticated. We developed standardized templates for documenting incidents, tracking everything from client complaints to operational breakdowns. Former team members provided detailed accounts of meetings gone awry, while current employees shared internal communications that highlighted Richard's growing instability. Financial analysts within our network helped interpret the economic implications of his decisions, creating a comprehensive picture of how his management style was impacting not just Crestwood but the broader marketing ecosystem. Our efforts extended beyond mere documentation. Industry veterans with decades of experience began offering pro bono consultations to affected clients, helping them navigate the transition period while maintaining their marketing momentum. Legal experts joined our cause, providing guidance on how to protect intellectual property and maintain professional integrity amid the chaos. Even suppliers and vendors contributed their perspectives, painting a complete picture of how Richard's decisions were rippling through the supply chain. The coordination required careful orchestration. We established protocols for verifying information, ensuring that every claim could be substantiated by multiple sources. Time-stamped records and corroborating evidence became our currency, building a case that was both compelling and irrefutable. Weekly virtual meetings brought together participants from different sectors of the industry, each contributing their piece to the larger puzzle. The collective intelligence we were assembling wasn't just about exposing Richard's incompetence, it was about creating a blueprint for systemic change in how marketing agencies should be managed and evaluated. As our network grew, so did our influence. Key industry figures began taking notice of the consistent pattern of failures emerging from Crestwood. Professional associations started receiving formal complaints about the company's declining standards. Media outlets picked up on the story, initially reporting on isolated incidents but gradually piecing together the larger narrative. Through it all, we maintained a careful balance, pushing for accountability while protecting the careers and reputations of those still working within the company. The movement had transformed from a reaction to Richard's mismanagement into a powerful force for positive change in the industry. The gathering storm clouds of Richard's mismanagement finally broke with spectacular force during Crestwood's quarterly board meeting. As shareholders reviewed the damage report, the full extent of his catastrophic leadership became undeniable. Revenue projections had plummeted by 60%, client retention rates had dropped to historic lows, and operational costs had spiraled out of control due to repeated failed initiatives. The once stable company now faced potential lawsuits from major clients and was bleeding talent at an alarming rate. Board members, who had initially supported Richard's appointment as part of a cost-cutting measure, found themselves staring at financial statements that painted a picture of impending disaster. In a dramatic turn of events, the board convened an emergency session. Armed with the meticulously documented evidence I had helped compile, they began peeling back the layers of Richard's disastrous tenure. The chronology of mistakes read like a textbook case of corporate mismanagement: critical projects abandoned halfway through execution, experienced staff replaced with unqualified acquaintances from Richard's previous jobs, and million-dollar marketing budgets squandered on ineffective campaigns. Most damning was the comparison between Crestwood's current performance metrics and those from just 3 months prior, a stark illustration of how quickly institutional knowledge and operational efficiency could be destroyed by incompetent leadership. The board's investigation uncovered additional layers of trouble that even I hadn't anticipated. Auditors discovered irregularities in expense reports and questionable hiring practices that suggested possible favoritism and conflicts of interest. Several high-profile clients had already terminated their contracts, and others were actively negotiating exit clauses. The company's credit rating had been downgraded twice in as many months, making it increasingly difficult to secure necessary funding for ongoing projects. What had started as a series of tactical missteps had escalated into a full-blown existential crisis for Crestwood marketing. As the board deliberated behind closed doors, the ramifications of their findings began rippling through the business community. Industry analysts, armed with leaked documents and insider information, started publishing detailed reports about Crestwood's decline. Competitors adjusted their strategies to capitalize on the company's weakened position, while concerned stakeholders demanded immediate action. The pressure mounted as news of potential layoffs and office closures began circulating, creating a climate of uncertainty that threatened to accelerate Crestwood's downward spiral. Note: this section sets up the escalating conflict and corporate crisis without resolving the story, leaving room for further developments in subsequent parts. The unfolding crisis at Crestwood Marketing had evolved into something far more complex than a simple tale of managerial incompetence. As I watched events unfold from my unique vantage point, I recognized that this situation represented a pivotal moment in the marketing industry's evolution. The interconnected nature of modern business meant that Richard's actions weren't just affecting a single company, they were influencing perceptions, practices, and power dynamics across the entire sector. Every misstep he made, every client relationship he damaged, and every talented professional he drove away contributed to a broader narrative about the importance of competent leadership in an increasingly competitive marketplace. The patterns emerging from Crestwood's collapse revealed crucial lessons about organizational vulnerability. Companies that had once prided themselves on stability and tradition were proving remarkably susceptible to disruption when faced with poor leadership. The speed at which Richard's decisions unraveled years of careful development demonstrated how fragile even the most established institutions could be. This realization prompted serious discussions throughout the industry about implementing more robust safeguards against similar situations, including improved vetting processes for leadership positions and enhanced mechanisms for employee feedback and intervention. More significantly, the crisis was reshaping how marketing agencies approached their operations and client relationships. The old guard of corporate hierarchy and rigid structures was giving way to more fluid, responsive models that prioritized adaptability and genuine expertise over traditional notions of authority. Agencies began re-evaluating their leadership pipelines, recognizing that technical proficiency and industry knowledge were becoming as crucial as managerial skills. The incident served as a wake-up call for many organizations that had grown complacent in their success, forcing them to confront uncomfortable truths about their own vulnerabilities and areas for improvement. From my position at the nexus of this transformation, I observed how the industry was beginning to self-correct. Professional associations started developing new certification programs and competency assessments for leadership roles. Client-agency relationships evolved to include more stringent performance metrics and accountability measures. Even recruitment practices underwent significant changes, with greater emphasis placed on proven track records and specialized knowledge. The marketing world was learning from Crestwood's mistakes, using this crisis as a catalyst for meaningful reform and innovation in how businesses were structured and managed. As these changes gained momentum, I found myself at the forefront of a movement that was redefining professional standards in our industry. The network of concerned professionals I had helped build was transforming into a powerful force for change, advocating for transparency, competence, and ethical leadership in marketing organizations. The lessons learned from Crestwood's downfall were becoming foundational principles for a new era of corporate responsibility and accountability. Yet even as these positive developments took shape, the situation at Crestwood itself remained unresolved, promising further complications and revelations that would continue to impact everyone involved.